No. Okay, perfect. I'll just do an introduction. Good morning, everybody. My name is Molly. I work with the Notre Dame Sisters. We just got connected with Sister Joan Polak, who has graciously been offered the laptop of Sister Celeste. So thank you so much. I'm here today to just have a conversation with Sister Joan so we can get to know her a little bit better. I've obviously seen her around the offices plenty of times. But it's only when you start to look into the archives and get to know our sisters that you realize what an incredible, rich life and great ministries that they've had over the years. And every time I see a picture of Sister Joan, she's in some new exotic place throughout the decades. So I'm very excited to get to speak with her. I'm going to bring her in now. Good morning, Sister Joan. How are you?
Hassled. Good morning. I almost forgot about our interview.
Well, I'm glad somebody remembered. How are you? Do you live next door to Sister Celeste? Was it a long journey?
It's a short journey, and she's a great buddy.
Just putting your name on the screen as if anybody wouldn't know. So how has it been since, I think I've calculated that it's now been over 3 months of our social distancing and little quarantine?
Well, I enjoy doing crafts and sewing, and so I keep busy. I'm not bored.
I heard that you're working on a really stunning quilt. Have you finished it?
No. I don't know which quilt you're talking about. I've got the pieces all done, and it's already been machine quilted by a friend of mine who does them. And so it's just waiting for me to trim off the edges and put the binding around the edge. That's a big job.
I'm sure it is. I was just talking with Sister Josita in the hallway. She said that you've always been crafty your entire life. Is that true?
Yes, I think so. Well, we can look back when I used to babysit her. I used to take a little tin can from sardines and make sections in it, and that was our egg crate. And then I would naughtily take pigeon eggs and put them in there, and then we would make our mud pies with them. So that's kind of the earliest that I remember of being kind of creative.
How old were you when you were babysitting Sister Josita?
12 or 13.
And where was this?
In between Brainerd and Dwight. They lived on a farm out there.
And how many people were you looking after at 12 or 13, making all the mud pies and causing trouble?
I think there were, 4 of them.
So you've always been a natural caretaker and a natural creative.
You could say that, I guess.
So when did you begin attending Notre Dame Academy?
For freshman year in 1943.
And did you ever teach at Notre Dame after that?
Oh, no. I went there all through high school, 4 years. Then went to college, and then I entered the community. And then we were assigned, high school was not my forte. I liked the little ones. I taught mostly kindergarten, first, second. I think the highest grade I taught was 5th grade.
Well, when I read about you, it looks like you were in a different country almost every decade. Can you tell me a little bit about your travels and your ministry work that brought you to all these different places?
Well, when the community decided that we were going to accept a mission in Chile, in South America, it was thrown out to the sisters if anybody wanted to volunteer to go. And I didn't even consider it at the time that the invitation was given, because there were two sisters that either knew Spanish or were studying Spanish, and I thought it was natural that those two would go. But I was teaching in Harlan, Iowa at the time, and people kept saying to me, "You volunteered, didn't you?" Every time I would come to Omaha and meet with the sisters, someone would say, "You volunteered, didn't you?" And I kept saying, "No, I didn't." And I kept thinking about that if so many thought I volunteered, maybe I should. So flippantly going down the stairway with the superior at that time, I said, "If you're still looking for somebody, I'll go." And kept on walking, didn't even carry on a conversation. And next thing I knew, I got a letter and said, "We want you to do this interview." And Nancy, so I did. And then.
And do you know what year we're talking about right now?
1963.
Okay.
And so I was chosen to go. So I went.
So how long was your first stay in Chile?
4 years, 63 to 67.
And what did you do for 4 years?
The first thing we did was do visit homes to get to know the people of our parish, who was in our boundaries, set up a kind of a diagram of who lived where, and then we asked the people what was their most important thing they wanted us to do. And the biggest response was catechetical classes. And so that was my first thing I started teaching.
Were you teaching in Spanish right when you started?
Oh yeah, well I had not, let's see, I can't remember how many months of Spanish in Puerto Rico. It was intensive. So by the time I left Puerto Rico, I was speaking, as it were, some Spanish.
And what were some of your impressions of Chile?
It's like so many of those countries, it's beautiful. There's so many things. I think one of the things that impressed me so much about the people, no matter which home we went into, whether it had a dirt floor or a different wood floor or any kind of other floor, there was always a bouquet of fresh flowers on the table. That I remember so vividly. And when a third sister came down, she decided to start women's groups. And then she decided to go back to the States. And so she said, "Joan, take over." And so I took over those groups. And what we did actually was teach each other. So they taught me how to knit. I taught them what I knew how to embroider. Probably it was, they taught me something. And then the culmination of my teaching was to teach them to bake an American pie without a pie tin.
So how did you do it?
Well, we used a square cake pan as a little one. So I had two different women's group in two different areas of the parish.
And which sisters were with you?
Sister Mariette was the first one who went down with me. Then later came Sister Jerome, and then she's the one that went back. And then Sister Ruth came. And I can't say that my Spanish was perfect because a family offered a drink, and I just recognized the word agua, which was water. And so I said, oh, yes, I was thirsty. Well, it was a drink a little stiffer than water.
Water plus?
Yes, I think it was agua aguardiente or something like that. Anyway, on a hot day, that was not too good.
No kidding.
So then,
what was your impression of teaching the kids, the children?
I didn't actually teach the children because I didn't feel I had the ability to do that. But I got myself a group of young people who were willing to be the teachers. And so that way I multiplied my work by having more teachers, and I would gather with them, give them the lesson for the next time, and we would talk about it. And then they would do the actual teaching of the kids. So.
And how did you feel about leaving after 4 years? Was that tough?
Very tough. You know, the Latin American people know how to live slowly, calmly. And I like that. I like that slow.
Intentional.
Whatever.
And so after Chile, where did you came back here, and then you had another South American mission, didn't you?
Well, before that, I was teaching. And then again, I had a call from community to do an experimental community living. And that was that I was to live with Religious of the Sacred Heart, Servite, and a Franciscan sister in
Honduras?
No, here in Omaha, among the poor.
Oh, okay.
In North Omaha, kind of in the area after, when the big riots and things were going on. Anyway, the four of us moved in that house. Part of the journey, that journey, was to find my own job. Up to that time, community always told us where we were going to go and what was our mission for the next year. And so I had to start job searching, and it had to be a job, of course, that would support me, and I could still support community. And it took a while. I finally ended up with a job at Nebraska Social Services. I was there for 22 years.
Oh my goodness.
As an interviewer of clients. And so and then when I was ready to retire, I asked community if I could go back to mission. And community said, okay, search out, another community, because we didn't have sisters anymore in Chile. They had come back. All of them had come back. So I wrote to a couple of communities and start looking where I could go. And the Notre Dame Sisters from St. Louis responded, and they had a mission in Honduras. So after I went again through another, I call it a testing period, I went, anyway, they said.
So tell me about what it was like to be interviewing local people for 22 years. I mean, you must have gotten to know everything about what people go through in Omaha.
Well, it was a battle for the agency to, first of all, hire me. They were afraid I wouldn't know how to handle or be with pregnant mothers out of wedlock. Then I wouldn't know how to put services and all this. But they said, okay, you can take the test. At that time, you had to take a state test in order to become a caseworker. So I went to Lincoln on not knowing much about anything. I went and I took the test. And before, when I found out I had to take the test, since I was not a social worker, I went to the library and got some books on social work and read a paragraph here and there. And anyway, I passed the test. And then I went back. There was an opening, and we finally agreed that they would hire me if I didn't use my title sister. I could only be known as Joan. And that was equally well with the co-workers. So.
Did that bother you at all?
Pardon?
Did that bother you?
No, because I told them I was going to use the word S in front of my name, and I still sign my name like that, S, Joan. And I say, if anybody asks me what that S is, I will tell them. So they kind of agreed to that, thinking that nobody's going to ask me, I'm sure. Anyway, while I was looking for a permanent job, I was hired to teach 22, 23, 24-year-olds in what then was Job Corps. Mm-hmm. And so I had a stint teaching. Then Job Corps was driven out of Omaha, so I no longer had a job. Anyway, and that piece is kind of important because one day the receptionist always handed you the name of a client that you were going to see, and then you went to the waiting room and called their name and took them for an interview. And so one day they gave me a name and I took it and I went to the waiting room, and a young girl jumped up at the top of her voice, screamed, literally screamed, "Sister Joan, what are you doing here?" She was one of the girls I taught at Job Corps. She recognized me. The receptionist just kind of gasped because she didn't know, and nobody else knew. But that broke it. From that point on, nobody cared what they called me. So anyway, it was an experience.
What was it like working with clients?
I really enjoyed it. The part that I mostly enjoyed was when the refugees started coming to the States. I interviewed the first refugee family that came into the office for assistance just by accident, pure choice.
Are these refugees from Vietnam or Cambodia or Laos? Do you remember?
This one was from Vietnam, and it was a family, a mother, a father, and children. And I didn't know what to do because it didn't fit our programs. It didn't. There wasn't a parent absent. They weren't sick. They weren't nothing, you know. So I went to administration and I said, I don't know what to do. What program did they fit? And the administrator said to me, "Oh, that's right. There is such a thing as a refugee program. Call Lincoln and find out about it more." So I called the offices in Lincoln and found out what to do and how they were eligible, because it was. So from that point on, I had the refugee program in complete control.
Did you love it?
Oh, yeah. I assisted meetings in Lincoln and Sioux City. And so it was kind of it was a challenge, and it was something new and different. And other workers would say to me, "How do you understand them?" And I said, "Well, they speak some English, that's anyhow." So I had the refugee program actually completely in control. I interviewed them all. I decided their eligibility. I went to their meetings. And then the Spanish people start coming in. So I was assigned most of the Spanish-speaking people because I could still speak some Spanish. So I found that challenging, delightful, something different.
After working with so many people who came to Omaha from some other place far away, mostly a different country or different language, did it give you any other impressions about living in Nebraska or living in Omaha?
Oh yeah, they were living in Omaha. There were refugees came here from Vietnam, Laos. I had a couple from Russia. Then when the people from Afghanistan started coming in, there were people, I had them.
Did it give you any new perspective on being an American or being local or anything like that?
Well, it certainly gave me a new perspective on food, because they would invite me to their celebrations. I couldn't eat with chopsticks, to be sure. They laughed at me, but it was fun. And you get to realize how much we are all one. It doesn't matter where we're from. We have the same problems. We have the same desires. We have the same hopes. It's just different. And so when that was and I taught somebody else how to do the program and retired after 20.
Well, before I ask you about your next mission, I just have to say we've got Mary Duffy said that she says, "Hello, Sister Joan. You taught me in first grade at Assumption School in South Omaha."
I sure did, and I remember her very much.
What do you remember about her?
Oh, she was a very studious little girl. And that class was my delight. I had them in kindergarten, and then I think I moved with them to first grade. So,
oh, that's perfect.
There's a number of them that I, still meet and still know, and they say, "Oh, you were my teacher."
Well, we also have Sister Josita, who says, Sister Joan was the best nanny to me and my four brothers, Hal, Jerome, George, Leo, and Ernest. And then Leo, who's also watching, said, Sister Joan was my favorite nanny. So you've got a lot of fans watching.
I didn't know I was a nanny.
Just a older troublemaker? I don't even know.
An older cousin.
So tell me about going back to South America after you retired, after you worked with refugees for so many years.
I was delighted to be able to go back again to that more quiet, slow-paced life. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do when I got there, but Sister Fatima became my correspondent before I came down. And so when I came down, she met me at the airport with a couple of other sisters. And then I stayed in El Progreso for a couple of nights before we went down to our little mission in Sulaco. And so I just kind of shadowed Sister Fatima in her work. And it wasn't very long after that classes, sewing classes were supposed to start. Fatima had actually organized a sewing class. She had hired a teacher, and they had, I think, a year or two in a building that a Peace Corps worker got the money to build a sewing school, an actual building, a one-room building. So Fatima says to me, Joan, I'd like you to take over the teaching, taking over the sewing school. Would you do that? I said, sure. What else? I wasn't going to take over some of her other work because that was way beyond me. She taught women how to make cement blocks that actually the women made to build that school. And they also laid the cement floor.
Wow.
That was her forte with women. Anyway.
So how long did you stay in Honduras?
Let's see, 12 years. And so I did not teach the sewing because I didn't know tiddlywinks about how to teach a sewing class. So what I did is I had charge of the teachers, and I worked with them with the teaching, got them the supplies. I taught crafts. I could do that because their sewing school was, you're taught to take measurements, and then you make your own pattern. So out of newspaper, they made their pattern, and they sewed the newspaper pattern together, and if it fit, then they could cut it out of material.
Oh my gosh.
So that, and then people thought, oh, Joan's teaching sewing class. I'll send her some patterns. Well, should I say what we did with the tissue paper? Because they couldn't use the patterns.
Because they were used to making their own?
Yes. And so they made that.
That's incredible.
That's the way the sewing school was taught in all the sewing schools in Honduras. So basically, I did that, and then there were three of us: Sister Fatima, Sister Neva, and I. Sister Neva started taking care of malnourished children. And she would rent a little house, and they would bring in the children, and she would care for them until they got healthy enough to go back to their homes. And then whoever was renting her a house, when she had it all nicely fixed up, they would want their house back. So she had to move. And this kept happening. So the decision was to build a nutrition center. So I helped get funds from people here in the States. And when I came back for a visit, the community had ice cream social to raise money. That was kind of a good start for the nutrition center. So I kind of had my hands in that a little bit. I didn't care for the children. I loved them, but I didn't know how to do that. So we helped, our community really helped set up that center.
Do you know if it still exists, that it's still going?
Sad to say, none of our works still exists. They, when I left, I authorized a group of my, that were my students in the sewing school who got together themselves. There were 5 of them. And out of a home, they would get together and they were sewing for people. And that was their livelihood. So when I knew I had to come back, because the other sisters, well, Fatima was the last one. She and I were the last 2 there. She was recalled to a different mission, and I knew I couldn't be alone there because I didn't drive, and you needed to do that. Anyway, as it happened, because, and Neva had left earlier and put the center in the hands of capable women. So I authorized this group of 5. They could use the school for their little company. And since none of the sisters were there to defend anybody or anything, the parish took away the school from them. We already also had a wood carving shop. And this young gentleman, Henry Hernandez, taught wood carving. He did beautiful work. Anyway, they also closed him out. They sold the buildings. They closed the nutrition center, sold the buildings. The only thing they left open was the hospital that another one of our money-making projects was to build a hospital. That, to the last of my knowledge, was still open for deliveries of pregnant women. Whether that still exists, I have no idea. I have no idea what happened to the clinic. So that was my greatest sorrow, to know that happened to my girls, as I call them, that had to once again find another place to be and to work for their livelihood.
And tell me about 12 years in Honduras. What was it hard to readjust to living back in Nebraska after that?
every big move like that is a big adjustment, I think, probably to everybody. I didn't like all the noise. I didn't like all the busyness, and you had to be here and there. And if you were 5 minutes late, you felt guilty in Honduras. If you were 10 minutes late, so you were early. So it's a different pace of life. A different.
And what's your pace of life like nowadays?
Well, it's slow. Like at 90, you don't move as fast as you did when you were 30.
Seems like your fingers still move very fast.
Not fast, but they move.
What are you working on right now other than the quilts? Are you embroidering anything? Working on any more Celebration of Spirit items for next year?
Yes, I am. I finished a pillow, except that I ran out of stuffing for it, so it's on hold. I've been not necessarily everything for the spirit dinner, because I'm trying, as I come across items, I had to move all of my things that I had in storage into my apartment. So as I go through the things I've had, I started this, I better finish this. So some isn't worthy of going to the spirit dinner. It goes either to the workshop, or I have another bin for things for the kids when we have our Christmas party for the staff.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm doing things like right now I'm doing, I don't know what you call it even. Anyway, it's a Christmas ornament I'm working on. And then I'm also working on, again, I had it started, and so I decided, you got to finish it, shopping bags. So I think I made 4 shopping bags already. I don't know what I gave a couple to Corona for the gift shop, but
well, speaking of getting back to all the sewing, I'm going to let you go and get back to your crafting and quilting and making the world more beautiful one stitch at a time. Thank you so much for speaking with me. This has been so educational. I love learning about you. Now I have even more questions to ask you next time I see you about your travels.
Well, next time you see me, I hope my hair is in better condition.
Yeah. Well, don't we all feel that way? I haven't got mine cut since before the virus started, so I'm really due also.
Okay.
Well, you have a great day, and I'll be talking to you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Molly.
Thank you.